The good news for the Boston Herald is that their Thursday cover story is the talk of the town. The bad news, that talk is largely negative, with critics accusing the tabloid of cultural insensitivity or full-on racism.
This is all according to the rules we operate under.
That's Massachusetts House Speaker Bob DeLeo defending his decision to keep his office's discretionary expenses under wraps. This week, the Boston Herald reported that those expenses included $5,000 worth of Chinese food, and that Governor Charlie Baker doesn't really mind.
There are a lot of people in this building working on the budget when it's going on.
Thursday, the Herald gave Baker's non-outrage the cover treatment, with the governor sitting in a carry-out container next to a fortune that read, "Taxpayers will not be happy," under the headline, "Walk Tall." Boston City Councilor Michelle Wu was not amused, tweeting that the cover promoted stereotypes often used to mock Asian Americans and was offensive and irresponsible. Also unimpressed, Boston Globe columnist Shirley Leung.
I almost had a visceral reaction when I opened it up. It's like, I can't believe this. Walk jokes are straight out of the 1970s. They weren't funny then. They aren't funny now. And I didn't even know what they meant by walk tall.
It's not the first time the Herald's been accused of racial insensitivity. Back in 2014, after a man snuck into the White House, this Herald cartoon imagined him getting into President Obama's bathroom and asking, "Have you tried the new watermelon-flavored toothpaste?" The cartoonist called it an innocent mistake.
My son's girlfriend in the past, she bought some toothpaste and left it in her closet upstairs. So I went and pulled it out, and it's a kid's Colgate watermelon flavor. I thought, well, that would be good, because I myself love watermelon.
More recently, Herald columnist Howie Carr described quaint Central American customs like drunk driving without licenses and machete slayings. As for the Baker cover, Herald editor Joe Shaka is waxing contrite, saying the front page was purely a reference to Chinese food. But when a concern is raised that the words or images we use are hurtful, we do need to listen and apologize. So I think this is a good case to sort of deconstruct what is making people respond the way they are to the Herald cover. When I look back at some of the examples that we cited in that piece, the watermelon toothpaste cartoon, the Howie Carr column making this grotesque generalization about Central Americans, it's really obvious what's problematic. But here I think it's a little trickier to tease out. So, Dan, you had sent an email suggesting that we do this when the story hit yesterday, and you said this is really toxic stuff. What specifically do you find toxic? Is it the headline, the imagery, the combination of the two, something else?
Well, you know, in fact, I did say this is really toxic stuff in the email, but on further reflection, I think it was insensitive. I don't know that I would necessarily call it deeply toxic. I do think that when Asians and Asian Americans start to explain to us that this is offensive to them, we need to listen. And it seems to me that Joe Shaka, the editor, has listened. He apologized, which is appropriate. So I do think we move on from here. I agree with you. I don't think this is nearly as bad as some of those other examples.
By the way, I didn't mean to out a private communication, which I think I just inadvertently did. Let me compensate, if I can, by saying that I had a similar reaction, too. When I saw this, before reading your email, I kind of had this slack jaw, what the hell is that? And then as I thought it through, I sort of changed my assessment in real time. So I'm on a similar page as you.
Yeah, and I do think that after it was pointed out to the Herald, they handled it appropriately.
All right, Callie, what was your take on this?
My take on it was that it was past racist. I mean, it was, past offensive and was racist. But I sit in a seat where there are constant images and stereotypes that keep bubbling up, and people do not see them embedded in the fabric of our nation. What I did was read the comments in the Herald because I wanted to see, well, what are people saying? Oh, lighten up. It's a joke. It's just Chinese food. What are you talking about? I don't get it. These are all people that is not directed toward. So I get it if you don't understand. So when people do explain it to you, as Michelle Wu did, and as others did, then please try to understand that it's offensive. And they said, I don't remember the Italians being that. Well, yeah, of course they were. And by the way, people were offended then. So this kind of stuff keeps coming up. And what often gets overlooked when you talk about Asian Americans specifically is that it's not seen as a clear delineation as often is seen with Black Americans. So some of that feels to people like, well, I eat Chinese food, and what's wrong with saying that? If I had some, I'd get hungry later. What's wrong with having them in the car? Well, you're making fun of people. You're, appropriating part of their culture in a way that is offensive. That's what it is.
I reacted to it on two levels. The first was as an editor, and I thought it was stupid. Walk tall doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I surely.
Yeah, they focused on.
That.
They focused on.
Is it because
the
Charlie
food.
Baker's tall, or do they want him to just walk tall mean push back against
No,
Bobby
if
Leo?
they want to
if
use
we don't
walk,
know, they just
want to use
use
the word
walk.
walk. That's it.
It's a pun for the sake of
Yeah.
having a pun, not
Yeah.
because it makes any sense.
Which is something tabloids do all the time.
All the time. But the other thing is, this had nothing to do with Chinese food. This could have been Italian food. It could have been burgers. It could have been pizza. The issue was the amount of money spent
Right.
and the fact that it was not disclosed. And so you don't need to illustrate it by the type of food that they used. It could have been an empty dinner plate.
So
there
you
are
mean
lots
it had,
of ways to
it had
do it.
nothing to do inherently with Chinese food? Because it was a $5,000 order
It was
that
a
Bob
five-
DeLeo placed at this
It was
Chinese
a five,
restaurant and went through.
that's what was astonishing. Not that it was placed at a Chinese restaurant. It's that it was a $5,000 order. An empty plate piled with cash and a knife and fork would have illustrated that even better. So that was my editorial reaction. My personal reaction was similar to Callie's. People who have not had this thrown at them will not understand why this is not funny. That's where I was.
Well, I agree. And, if you had a picture on the front page of a bunch of pizzas, it would just be, ridiculous for all sorts of other reasons, and it wouldn't have had that racial overtone that it does. So I agree with your points on racism here. But there's one other element, and again, as an editor, as you were saying, is that it really is stupid in that it doesn't have anything to do with the real story. And not only that, what it is a cartoon. And, it actually reminded me of the debate that's going on now about newspapers. And I'm a lover of newspapers. And I've begun to start worrying about cartoons in newspapers. What message do they send? And here's one of just a flat-out, illustrated, photographed cartoon on the front page. I don't see any reason for a publication to do that.
And we should say that the story itself was quite worthy.
Right.
Yeah,
So it
Yes.
just gets all mixed up with
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
And although it was
something-
too late for print,
Yeah.
they did rework the cover and post that online.
Well, and I think actually in some editions we got the later cover, which just showed, I believe.
Oh, did it? Okay.
One more thing. I know we're running a little bit long here, but I had a conversation with Michelle Wu before the show, and I said, I've been struggling to figure out what exactly is problematic about this today. Can you help me with it? And in a way, I'm paraphrasing what you guys have said, but she said, so much of the stuff that you saw on that cover has been used over the decades to make fun of Asian Americans. And in this case, it wasn't being used to make fun of an Asian American. It was being used to make fun of Charlie Baker and Bob DeLeo indirectly. But still, seeing it deployed to make fun, especially at this moment in political history, was really tough. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it.